Okay, to solve these same equations algebraically, we're going to solve these today by factoring, and the big crux of this whole thing today is what's called the zero product property. And what the zero product property says is that if we multiply two things together, two numbers, two expressions, whatever, and we get zero for a product, then one of those two things has to be 0. Either A is 0 or B is 0. So we're going to use that. So if you think about it, if you multiply something, say 6, and you get 0 for a product, that other thing has to be 0. So whenever you multiply two things together and you get 0 for a product, one of the two individual things has to be 0. So we're going to use that. We're going to factor and then solve each individual piece. Okay, so when we look at this one, we're going to look at A, and to factor A, we are going to look for, since A is 1, we're going to be able to go right to this. Okay, now a lot of you can go there. But these two numbers that go in here, they're going to multiply to that. It's going to multiply to 6 and add up to -5. Now, here's kind of the tricky thing here. 1 and 6, 2 and 3 are the only pairs of numbers that multiply to 6. Now, but both of these pairs can somehow give us -5. If 1 and -6 were added, 1 and -6, we get -5. However, when we multiply these two, we get -6 and not +6. So 1 and -6 cannot be the factors that we use. We can take -2 and -3. That gives us -5. When we multiply those two, we do get +6. So we're going to have -2 -3. Now, if you look at what's going on here, we are multiplying two expressions together. One of those expressions is x minus 2. The other one is x minus 3. We are multiplying these two expressions together, and we get 0 for a product. So what does that mean? That means that either x minus 2 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. That's the only way we can get 0 for a product, is if one of those two things is equal to 0. So, solving each of these individually for x, we add 2 in the left one, so x is equal to 2, or x equals 3. Now, if you recall, when we graphed these and calculated those solutions on the calculator, we had our two solutions, 2 and 3, where this parabola crossed that horizontal line. So that is the solution for that quadratic equation. Now, in order for us to be able to use this zero product property, we need to set this equal to 0. Okay? So what we're going to do in this one's not set equal to 0, so we're going to move this 12 over here by adding it. So once we move that, x squared minus 7x plus 12 is equal to 0. So then we can factor this. Since a is 1, we can go right to here pretty easily. And we're looking for factors of 12, which are either 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4, that add up to -7. Well, the only pair of these numbers that can somehow be manipulated to get -7 is the 3 and the 4. and the only way that happens is if they're both negative. So we're going to have minus 3 and minus 4 here. So then we're multiplying two expressions together. One of those expressions is x minus 3, the other one is x minus 4, and we are getting 0 for a product. So that means that one of these two expressions, either x minus 3 or x minus 4, one of those has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to set them both equal to 0 and solve each one for x. So in this case, to solve this one for x, we got to add 3, so x equals 3, or x equals 4. And if you recall, if you wrote them down, hopefully you know that that's what we found for our solutions when we used the graphing calculator for this particular problem. Okay. In this one, I'm actually going to do D first because we did that one on the calculator already. So I'm just going to continue with this one. And once again, we want to get 0 on one side here. So in order to do that, we're going to add the x, and that's a like term with the 14x, and we're going to subtract the 4, which is a like term with the 7. So then when we do that, we have 4x squared minus 13x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now, again, in order to be able to use that zero product property, you need to set it equal to 0. So, now, since a is not 1 now, we're going to go ahead and do that AC split method. And this was used in that 4.4b worksheet. Okay? Now, so what we're going to fill in, those two blanks, whatever numbers we fill in there, they have to multiply to the same thing that 4 and 3 multiply to. So they're going to multiply to 12. So to use that, we got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And they got to add up to negative 13. Well, the only pair of numbers here that can be manipulated to get negative 13 is the 1 and the 12. And if they were both negative, that works. Negative 1 times negative 12 is still positive 12. So we've got minus 1 and minus 12. So we're going to group these, first two and the last two. So we can take out an x out of the first one, so we have 4x minus 1 left. And don't forget, we want to have 4x minus 1 left inside these parentheses here as well. So then, what do we need to factor out in order to end up with 4x minus 1? Well, ask yourself, what do I multiply 4x by to get negative 12x? And the answer is negative 3. So, then our two sets of parentheses are x minus 3, 4x minus 1, and that's equal to 0. So now we're down to where we can use our zero product property, where we're multiplying two expressions together, getting 0 for a product. So that means either this expression has to equal 0, or this expression has to equal 0. And so, to solve this for x, we simply add 3. this one, we do a little bit more work. We got to add 1 and then divide by 4. So we get the 1/4, which, if you recall, those are the solutions we found when we graphed them on the calculator and calculated the intersection. So now jumping over to C, and again we want to set this equal to 0. So that means we need to subtract the 2. So 14 minus 2 is 12, positive 12. And we also need to add the 2x. 30x plus 2x is 32x. And then we've got the 5x squared. So we're going to factor the 5x squared plus 32x plus 12. And in order to do that, we're going to do that AC split method, where we split up that middle term and then try to find what we're going to put in those two blanks. Now, in those two blanks, those two numbers are going to multiply to the same number that 5 and 12 do. So 5 times 12 is 60. So we can list all the factors: 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, and 6 and 10. And that's it. 7 doesn't, 8 doesn't, 9 doesn't. Okay? And we want them to add up to 32. Well, the only pair of numbers that can be manipulated to get 32 is the 2 and the 30. So we're going to put 2 and 30 here. We're going to group the first two and the last two. So out of that first 2, we can factor out an x. Nothing goes into 5 and 2 other than 1. So we're going to have 5x plus 2 left, which means our second set of parentheses, we want 5x plus 2. So we got to think about what we need to factor out. And what do we multiply 5x by to get 30x? Well, the answer is 6. So then our two sets of parentheses are the terms in front, the x plus 6, and that common set of parentheses. So now we can use our zero product property because we've got product of two expressions equaling 0. So that means one of these two expressions, either x plus 6, has to equal 0, or the other expression, 5x plus 2, has to equal 0. So we're going to solve each of these for x. We solve this one by subtracting 6. We solve this one by subtracting 2, then dividing by 5 to get negative 2/5 for our solutions. Which means that the x-coordinates of the intersection of this parabola and this line, hopefully you can tell me that the y-intercept is 2 and the slope is negative 2. The x-coordinates of those points of intersection are negative 6 and negative 2/5. That's what that means graphically. So finally, we've got 2 more examples. And again, in both of these, you want to make sure you get 0 on one side of the equal sign. Well, for this one, we're going to take 2x squared plus 7x, and we need to subtract 15 to get to 0. So, doing the AC method, we've got 2x squared, 2x squared, something x plus something x minus 15. So these two numbers are going to multiply to negative 30, so that's 2 times negative 15. So we have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. And we want those to add up to 7. Well, the only two that we can manipulate to get 7 is 10 and 3, and that's if the 3 was negative. Still multiply to negative 30, so we're good. So we're going to put negative 3 here and 10 here. And once again, it does not matter which number you put in which blank. So we're going to group the first two, group the last two. This one we can take out an x since nothing goes into 2 and 3. So we'll have 2x minus 3 left. We want 2x minus 3 here. So we need to factor out a positive 5. So we've got our two sets of parentheses, x plus 5 and 2x minus 3. And now, since we have our two expressions that we're multiplying together to get 0 for a product, that means that one of those two, either x plus 5 or 2x minus 3, has to be equal to 0. And solving each one, the first one we solve by subtracting 5. The second one we solve by adding the 3 and then dividing by 2. So we end up with 3 halves. And finally, the last one. Some of you might be able to, since a is 1, just jump straight down to the two sets of parentheses. If you want to follow this method, you certainly can. I'll just walk you through it on this one. Since it's already set equal to 0, we'll go ahead and split that up. And these two numbers in here are going to multiply to negative 24. 1 times negative 24, so all those pairs of numbers are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6, and we want them to add up to 2. Well, the only two numbers we can manipulate to get 2 are the 4 and the 6, and to get a positive 2, the 4 needs to be negative. So we're going to put negative 4 here and 6 here. Again, that does not matter which one goes where. Group the first two, group the last two. We can take on an x out of that first set, so we end up with x minus 4. We want x minus 4 here, so we need to take out a positive 6. So then our two sets of parentheses are x plus 6 and x minus 4. So then again, setting each part equal to 0. And solving each one for x. The first one we need to subtract the 6. The second one we need to add the 4. And there are two solutions. Again, with these you can always check at the end. Make sure each one makes this true at the beginning. 36 minus 12 is 24, minus 24 is 0. 16 plus 8 is 24, minus 24 is in fact 0. You can always check and make sure they work. Okay? Then starting this week, we are going to look at some different methods for solving these for those that do not factor. We're going to look at completing the square and the quadratic formula. Because unfortunately, factoring doesn't always work. Now, I'm sure some of you will think, Fortunately, factoring doesn't always work. You may not want to use factoring, but believe me, it is easier than the other ones. It's less work for those that can be factored. So quite a bit easier to work with. So factoring should always be your first option if you can. But later on this week we're going to look at how we can solve some of these equations when factoring is not an option.